Welcome, everybody. My name is John Cornicelli. It is now 1700 Zulu, and welcome to our user group webinar of 2023. I'm the new program manager of the NOAA GNC-A program. I came over from Department of Homeland Security. I haven't been on the job more than a month, really. So this is literally my first briefing here. Thank you very much to Diego and Ian for prepping me for this. And Diego has offered to help with any translations. So please feel free to submit questions, even though I'm the new guy. We'll endeavor to answer them and put all your questions in the chat. If you need to unmute and ask a question, please remute your microphone as we progress on. Next slide, Mr. Diego. All right, so I'm going to present some updates from NOAA, and then we're going to presented by a representative from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Then we'll have an open discussion and an action item and summary session. Next slide, sir. All right, the first update from NOAA, we've been informed, well, this is new for me, but Ian and Seth and Diego have been dealing with this. They've seen this coming. The takeover of Meteosat 10, Meteosat 11 replacing Meteosat 10 for the FES Full Earth Scan mission. We've learned that UMETSAT will continue to FTP the same data sets to our servers, and that we will warn our users of any upcoming changes. These changes may involve file name changes, file headers, metadata changes, and we do expect, and we're confirming with UMETSAT that there will be a data outage on 21 of March. And so we posted a website here to update all of our customers as we get more information from UMETSAT. Next slide, sir. Details of this, I copied the notes into Spanish and Portuguese for anybody. Diego made sure I did not screw that up. And so this is for your information. You can go to the next one, sir. Okay, go on ahead. All right, so next thing I'll talk about is update to our hardware, firewall, and server configurations. We've confirmed that the outages will be occasional, not lasting much more than an hour. Some of these outages will only last minutes. The first set of outages will occur on March 7th between the times I listed right there, and we will be sure to send you all updates and warnings on when these outages will occur. The new contract has been let, and the contractor is very excited about getting these things done and causing as few disruptions to our users as possible. Any questions on that? All right, next slide, sir. All right, so before I came on board, I've learned that we've been getting requests from our users, and I'm going to follow in the footsteps of Ian and Seth's and research ways to satisfy as many of these user requests given the bandwidth restraints to the system. And as bandwidth increases over the years, we'll see if we can do more, right? And this list right here is a list I was provided of previous requests from customers of the type of products that we would like to get onto the system as soon as possible. But we're going to balance these with bandwidth limitations and any other contractual problems we may have. So we will be working on these, and feel free to submit more of these, and we will see if we can satisfy these. Any questions on this?
John, just let me quick
yes, sir.
say words on Spanish and Portuguese, because this is very important.
Okay.
Entonces, en el último año se recibió algunas solicitaciones de nuevos productos en la transmisión. Y, por ejemplo, como estos productos que están en esta diapositiva, ¿no? Y estos productos fueron solicitados en la última conferencia de satélites de la NOAA. Estas solicitaciones se van a analizar y ver las posibilidades de añadir estos productos a la transmissão. Pessoal, no último ano foram recebidas algumas solicitações de novos produtos no sistema, como esses que vocês estão vendo nesses slides, e agora que o John é o novo manager, é o novo gerente, né, do programa GeoNetcast, essas solicitações vão ser analisadas e adicionadas ao sistema caso seja viável. Si tienen alguna solicitação de novos produtos, podem enviar um correio. Se vocês têm alguma solicitação de novos produtos, podem enviar um e-mail para a gente que essas solicitações vão ser analisadas, ok? Go ahead, John.
I see a question in the chat that's relevant. Is there any plan to increase the GNC bandwidth? I have not heard anything, but I'm the new guy. I might have to defer this question to Ian about future plans for the bandwidth.
Hi, this is Ian. We have a contract option. NOAA does a contract option to increase the bandwidth from 20 to 25 megabit per second. But I can't say at this time. I cannot say at this time if we have the budget for it and when it might happen. But it is a possibility.
All right, next slide, sir. Okay, next I'd like to introduce our trainer. Mr. Mike Neilson comes to us from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Institute for Water Resources Hydrologic Engineering Center. And he's going to be presenting on OpenDCS and setting up an OpenDCS LRGS system to acquire data and do processing.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Feel free to share your screen. If it doesn't work, the backup, we'll advance the slides for you on this time.
One note, I tend to move back and forth a lot, so if I start trading in and out, let me know, and I will then go suffer my headphones for everyone.
There we go. Okay, we see your screen well, Mike.
All right, let's see. It's going to show up on the right screen. Nope, hold on. Okay. So I'm going to do a few slides by way of just a little introduction, and then I was actually going to be bold and just do a live demo of installing it into a virtual machine and actually pulling some of the data that I believe you all can use. So we'll see how that goes. So quick note, if anybody has downloaded the presentation, I tried to put most of the text in the notes section so that I did not end up creating a giant wall of text presentation. First matter of order, for those who haven't used it before, what is Open? Forth on that. But it involves a couple of components. There's the one we're going to focus on today, which is the LRGS, stands for Local Readout Ground Station. I think that used to have a little bit more direct meaning 10, 20 years ago, but now it's just the software component that can talk to a DRGS, an HRIT device, Iridium, or the HRIT DCS files. Can also do some other things. We'll go over that. Decodes is the engine that lets you take those messages and turn it into some other format. And there's also a computation engine. So USACE, who I work for, and the USBR, we use it on our respective databases to handle doing things like stage flow conversions, elevation storage conversions, other complex. It's named in the project OpenTSDB, but that is a large existing open source project on its own. So we are renaming that. And then the one thing that is important to some, it is an open source project. It used to only have really the one developer people went to, Mike Maloney. He has retired. He's still around on the project. He provides feedback when he wants to. But we have about 5 people that actively contribute to it, and we welcome anybody that wants to even try. So you can go to GitHub and see the code, see how we do things, comment on things, you know, if needed. Like I said, goal for today, let's just get it running and see what it actually does. I find that actually going through something lets people ask better questions. more time for questions. The documentation can be found here. And then just so people are aware, if you look at it in its current state, we are actively working on it. There's a lot of cleanup to do before we do certain improvements. We're doing as many improvements as we can as identified and are able to do. We're working towards making things more cloud friendly for those that need it. We're not ever going to go cloud only. It's always going to be something that you could run locally if you need to, but we do want it to work well on the cloud for people. There is, I think this is probably very relevant to this group. Most of the developers are native English speakers, or for myself, English only. I took German in high school, but you don't want me to try and write a translation for German. Native, we wouldn't be able to do it, but again, it's an open source project. We would gladly accept those contributions if you were able to fund it. The documentation doesn't have the hooks yet. If somebody says, hey, we definitely want that, I will go put the hooks in place. The GUI in the actual program has the hooks in place already. We just need the translation files. And then if you are actively using it or you start using it and you have to identify your own future work, those are the three places to do so. Okay, so now we're going to actually start to walk through. So the rest of these are, we'll start with this one. So I was going to try and provide a virtual machine for everyone to try and follow along, but after I got it all set up, I realized it was 8 gigabytes and it was going to be kind of a pain to distribute in a day. You can do this. I created uses Java 11. And yeah, I'm just going to go get into it. Okay, oh, not that button. I'll stop sharing my screen. Let's move that out of the way. Okay. Well, before I actually start doing all of this, is there any questions that people want to bring up now?
This is Ian. I have a question about, you have prepared a virtual machine image. What software do you need to run that virtual machine image on? VirtualBox?
So I created it with VirtualBox, and what I did is I exported it to an OCI image so you can CAD after I got it ready.
Thank you.
Let me just translate that. Mike va a compartir, si es interesante para todos, va a compartir después de la reunión una imagen de una máquina virtual, Ubuntu, con las cosas ya configuradas, ¿no? Como él está usando esta máquina virtual y puede compartir con vosotros para vuestras próprias pruebas después del webinar. Então, pessoal, o Mike ele tem essa imagem da máquina virtual e ele pode compartilhar com os interessados após o webinar, tudo bem? Go ahead, Mike.
All right. So I'm just going to start simply. So since we're in a Linux environment, I'm going to do a fair amount in the console first because there's a lot of in this VM, I've already downloaded the software. So we're just going to get it going. So to start the actual install process, this is anyone who's installed a Java-based program may have done this already, fairly basic. We have your classic simple GUI installer. There are more advanced installations, so you can have, multiple versions, multiple users. We're going to keep it simple today. Documentation on how to do the other ways is in the documentation. So directory doesn't exist, and so it'll create it. There are the different components. So for the core and USBR, we have our own individual components to do things different ways. You can install those. You probably won't get a lot of benefit out of it because most of the features require And then these goes and installs. And then one thing I noticed while I was doing this demo, in Ubuntu, this generate shortcuts button doesn't actually do anything because Linux changed how they did their shortcuts. So need to investigate. Okay. So now we can see that it is installed. And so the default installation has a couple of different configuration files. The lrgs.conf, that's our basic for the LRGS. This one is for getting connections to other LRGS systems. NOAA system, you could connect to it and get data, but we're actually going to turn that off. I just realized last week that this is on by default, so anyone who installs this and turns it on the first time is going to go and ping both the USGS and NOAA networks, which is probably not what either of them want. So this is getting defaulted to false in the future, but we are changing it manually now. Let's see. I'm going to try and follow my demo text as much as possible. Okay. Yeah. And then one thing that we can do to make our lives easier, we're going to edit this file. If anybody's ever used Linux or Bash or Mac before, or another Unix-like system, you'll and that's all that's doing. Okay. So we're going to go back into that directory, and this is just to make sure files are contained. So now that that's working, we can actually just type start LRGS, and very exciting, isn't it? Yeah, it actually is working. So the LRGS program is a service. It is a background program. It does not by default show anything. But if we look, we can see that the log is generated. And it is doing things. So you can see it loading the configs. So now we're actually going to get to the, a somewhat exciting part. Oops. That one, okay. Apparently that's a Linux command. Never actually used it before. So, but to get the right one, we can do that. If I'd have made sure that the OpenDCS bin was first before in the path, that wouldn't have happened. Okay. So by default, yeah. And then somebody, I'm not going to watch the chat very much. So if something comes up in the chat that I need to stop for, if somebody could stop me. Okay. So the default username and password is LRGS admin and LRGS admin. I actually we are going to be changing that to generate a random password on first boot because, well, it's just bad practice for like the last 5 years and we just haven't gotten to it. Okay. Given moment. You can connect to it on localhost, which is what we're doing now. As you can see, you can connect to different systems. That's a fun quirk. So right now, it's not actually doing anything because we don't have it configured to go to another LRGS. We don't have it configured onto a DRGS or anything like that. But what we're going to do is configure it for the HRIC files because my understanding is that's what everyone has access to. So it will expand shell variables. Those should also work in Windows. I don't do a lot of testing in Windows directly, but I believe that does work. These are arbitrary. If you're naming the files a certain thing, you pick that. This is only be 2 characters. This identifies the source of a particular piece of data. when it comes through. As you can see, if you had a DRGS and an HRIT file, you would be getting the same data 3 times, so that lets the system identify where it came from. Just through experimentation, the CCSDS header present needs to be unchecked for the files that I was provided. I see a hand up.
Hi, Mike. Yes, a quick question. If you prefer, we can hold questions till the end. First, answer that question.
Well, is the question directly about this interface or more general?
Yes, directly about this interface.
I would say go for it.
The two character source code, will it prevent you from using the same 2 characters twice?
You know, I don't think so.
Okay, that was
That's
my
a good question.
Thank you.
I would say definitely don't do that, but I don't know if that'll actually prevent it. Okay, so if we go over here and then hit apply, you can see in real time it started to reload everything. Although we are going to have to restart the LRGS, I think because these folders don't exist, it fails. I'm also going to go tweak a few settings. So I'm just going to try through. I'm going to see what this can do. So when I was testing this, because I was using the files and they came in rarely, the whole system kept timing out and saying it was unusable. And I kept having to copy the files back in. So I'm going to, in real time, try something different, see what happens. Okay. So if you notice, it's not actually even showing up in here yet. So we're going to leave this open a new terminal. Actually, we're going to start with this correct. So we're going to make those 2 directories, HRIT and HRIT done. Okay, and then to stop the LRGS when you're running it this way, you actually just remove that lock file. So LRGS.lock. And as we look at the log, you can see it's shutting down. You can see that RTStat says I can't connect anymore. We'll go ahead and cancel something. And then it says exiting. So look. So we're trying to see if it's running. If you look for LRGS main, that's the class name for people that know what that means. You can see if it's there. Okay. So then I'm just going to start it again because I think that's all we need to do. Okay. Yeah. And so now you see there's it says LRIT. I believe that is just the system lumping all of the HRIT LRIT stuff together. So we go and dump some data in. So we could do one of these files at a time. I'm just going to dump them all in. And then you see it processed 1,380 messages, and 2 of them had parity errors. That's where you can see there's that many good messages and then that many that have a parity error. One thing to note, these counts, try to sum them up, will often not match because sometimes they will be ignored because they're just completely bad or garbled or something. So if you're kind of looking at this as you're running the system and going, oh, do I have enough? Probably want to focus on just the total in archive. If the total in archive matches what you expect, that's the archive of good messages. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into one of the larger programs. So there's one program that's the same name. There's a DCS, there's launcher start, and then there's DCS dual start. I can't remember why there's both, but they open up the exact same interface. So this LRGS status button, that just opens this. But we are going to look at the message browser now so we can actually see the data. So here we put in the same information, it automatically pull it in, hit connect, and then you can either do display all and show it all, but we'll just do display next one at a time. Mostly because, does anybody know whose station this is? Because that is a ridiculous amount of data, and I'm really curious as to what it is. I'm gonna paste the NESDIS ID in and see if anybody actually knows. That's for characters. No. So I actually am going to demo decoding the data. So these are pseudo-binary and not super well labeled. This one's reasonably well labeled, but I'm going to go with the one that I put in the demo so people can follow along a little better. Let's scroll down and find it. So you can see, I think everybody's familiar with the ghost messages and dealing with them. If you don't know what they are already, it's kind of impossible to know sometimes unless they're very well labeled. There we go. And this one is. So whatever site this is, it clearly says this is stage, and that's the battery load. I'm still going to make a couple assumptions. One, that's 15-minute data, and that it's 2 hours of data. That's not unreasonable. Most people commonly do that. Let's see. The next thing we're going to do is what's called the Decode database editor. So by default, OpenDCS comes with and uses an XML database, which is good for little demos like this. They're terrible for like sharing the config amongst people. But if you're only ever running it on one computer, it works. If you did have an actual database, like you were using the built-in database or you were using one of the other ones, you can just come down here and select it and then put in the appropriate things and it would connect to your database. The GUI itself doesn't really change. But to actually be able to go to station, we need 3 things. We need a site. Some people might refer to this as a location in their database. We need a config, and that's just associating so site and then config, and that's associating a set of sensors with a script that takes the message and turns it into that list of sensors, and the platform associates the site and the config. And then you'll need sources and what's called a routing spec. Which actually says, okay, take this source, get me these stations, do this operation on them. And that's kind of the end goal of this, is having that running. First, we need to start with sites. If you don't have a site, you can't really configure anything else. I mean, real quick, does anybody actually know the name of this site for this NESDIS ID? If not, I'm just going to use the NESDIS ID as the name. These names are free form. If you select one of these options, it will be constrained to what that option requires. Local itself is quite free form. You can put description information. You can add properties that get used down in the other components, and then there's your usual locality information as available. Okay, so I just got the chat. So somebody did offer one. Let's get through this one. It's nice and simple, and then maybe we have time, we can do another one just to kind of reinforce the point, and that'd be good to have an example from somebody. Okay, so now that the site's done, one thing I noticed while doing this, every once in a while, it's not a bad idea. You want to make sure you hit this commit button so it actually saves to disk. Every once in a while, you want to come up in here and hit this commit all also. I ended up with a strange bug, and it was because the site didn't save. So one thing to note about configs, I named it after our station, so it's really meant for this station. The configs don't have to be one-to-one station to sensors in the script. If you have a bunch of stations that are the same, like if you had 20 stations that were formatted this exact same way, you could write one config for them and then use that over and over again. which is the recommended way to do things. So we know that's staged because it says so in the script. I'm going to assume it's 15-minute data. If you know, of course, choose the correct one. If you know the first sample time is an offset, you could put that in there. These aren't commonly used, but you can use them to eliminate data before it does any further processing. And then sometimes you got to go in and use some of these things, but they're not super common. The model ID is only used by HDB. The ones prefixed with SWIMS are, of course, only used by SWIMS. Offset and scale, we'll let it do a little math right away. There are other places to do that as well. If you had a list of your equipment, like if you were tracking everything in OpenDCS and like you knew this was Campbell Scientific Shaft Encoder, for example, you could go in and select that. But that's all optional. The only things required are the name, one of these standards, and making sure your sampling interval is set correctly. And that one's hourly because there's only one and most ghost transmissions are hourly, so that is also a reasonable assumption. So now we create our script. We're just going to call it goes. Data order ascending, descending. You do want to get that correct. If your data is in reverse order, it'll handle that for you. We know this is a goes message. And if everything's working right, you can load from your LRDS. You actually have to have the source defined first before this works, or you can just paste in the message. That would work if that wasn't what's called a modal dialog. So give me a second so I can actually copy paste that out. Okay, so I don't have any format statements. If I just click the code, it says no format statements. So I'm adding two. I know there's two because I know there's two sensors. You don't actually have to decode everything in a message. If you didn't care about the battery voltage, you could just ignore it. The labels themselves are arbitrary, but I would keep them friendly name because you can use them to redirect to the next thing. So I don't want to get into great detail right now on the decode language because that can be a bit of a rabbit hole. So I'm going to kind of do the absolute basics. So this portion I've highlighted, that is the header. That is not processed within the decode script. That's processed for us beforehand. So we're starting at this quotation mark. And we only really care about the data. So we have to skip so many characters. So what we're going to do is we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14. I think that's, yeah, 14. 14x. So an x means skip a character. You put a 14 in front of it. It means do it so many times. And then we have 8 samples. We know it's a sensor. We know it's an ASCII. ASCII is just plain text. And then we have a rough idea of how many characters each one is. So those are 3, 4, yeah, 6 characters. So I'm going to say 7. I like to overestimate the characters when I'm doing it this way. That says read up to 7 characters and it ends at a space. And then put it into sensor number 1. So I'm going to start with this out. When we hit the code, you can see how now we have all of that. And then I'm in the US, so all of our stages are in feet. I have no idea where this sensor is. And 192 feet for stage does seem a little odd to me. But we kind of want to just pick a unit anyway, so I'm going to call it feet. And then this one's clearly volts. These don't do any conversions. This is just saying that is in feet. If you do need to do a conversion, there are algorithms. You can do your simple, y equals mx plus b from algebra. There's a polynomial equation. And then there's USGS standard equation, which can do some pretty advanced things. This one I'll actually let you do Celsius Fahrenheit conversions if you needed to. But if the data is already in the correct units, the algorithm is just none. You're just saying it's in feet. So as you notice, though, we don't have the battery voltage here. So now we actually want to get that also. Battery. And so the way this works is when it's done this processing, it's gotten to here. It'll honestly be either here or here. I'm pretty sure it ends there. So as the scripts go through and it's processing, it internally is moving the cursor. So when it gets that first one, it's here, and then it goes, okay, let me do it again. Okay, there's a space, yada, yada, yada. And then when it gets to the very end, it says, okay, I've done everything, what to do next? And we're telling it, okay, go to the battery label to do next set of statements. So we're going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, since it's only one sensor, we don't have to put the digit in front like we did with the one above. And then that is 5. Honestly, I don't see if your battery voltage goes above 99, you've got larger problems. Probably a fire. Okay, and then as you can see, well, you probably can't see it because it's in cyan, and let's be honest, that's a terrible color choice. But it does actually say 13.72. There are ways to change these colors. At some point, we really need to go through and change the defaults to a friendly color palette. It's kind of one of those nice to do things that's on the list, but we're trying to fix other major issues. But one thing you note, the text in the sample message has changed to the same color as the text here. This is to help you kind of go, oh, okay, it stored it in that one and it treated that one as that one. If you want to know more about what it's doing, you click this trace button, and it'll actually give you a bunch more messages about what it's doing and why. I don't find this very helpful for new people. I really do want to revamp this to provide more user-friendly messages. This has been really invaluable for us trying to diagnose bugs, but that doesn't help somebody just trying to. Is there a question? I think somebody unmuted. You're right.
I think it's you, Sandra, that is unmuted.
Oh, screen name. Okay, still in the name. Because I had to exit out of here to get into the message browser, one thing to note, when you're first doing this, you set everything up, you try to decode it. It's going to give you a message and say, hey, you haven't committed your station yet. You just got to save it, hit commit, and go back in. Personally, I find that a little annoying, and I know what to do to fix it, but it involves more work than you would think, unfortunately. Okay, so now we have a site, and we have a config. Now we need a platform. So you can see the sites, you can only, it's not freeform, you can only choose from what you've configured. So we'll select that, and then same with the configs. And then these are optional. They can be handy when you're doing different things. And then this is a interesting little tidbit. If you have a site that collects like a bunch of stuff from, say, like other sites that are maybe like not too far away, but far enough away that you want to call it a different site, but if you have one ghost transmitter, you can actually, if you have multiple sites, you can actually say, no, this sensor is actually this site, and then change like the parameter names. At the district I used to work at in USACE, we used to do that. We had one dam that was really just it was a dry dam, but the local irrigation district had some downstream stuff. And so we just had the one unit up top and everything just funneled in, but we needed it to be two different places. Sorry. Trying not to sidetrack too much. So to actually get things associated right, you need to do what's called the transport medium. So this is actually telling us how we're getting it. One thing to note, as you change the transport medium type, the options change. Like it doesn't make sense for a normal network connection based DCP to have the same options as the goes random or self-timed. But we are goes. So we are going to use this one. And so I am going to enter this information because I figured out how to get it from the header. So the manual does have an explanation of how this header works. First 8 characters are the ID. Then you have year, month, you have year, and then you have Julian day of the year, and then you have the hour, minutes, and seconds. So 24:30. I'm just going to assume that the transmitter is on time on this thing, and it's actually starting at 30 seconds. It could actually be a little bit off from that, but for what this demo is doing, it doesn't really matter. You would want to make sure that's correct because there are other interfaces that will help you determine, oh, it's off, and show that visually. Okay, so now we save that. All right. So now we have our platform, site, and config. One thing to note, these updated the tab correctly with the right name. I have no idea why this one doesn't. Probably because it just wasn't programmed to do so. But if you open it up, or if you close it and open back up, then it has the correct name. So next thing we want to do is the routing spec. But a routing spec I know needs a source, so I'm going to skip that and actually just go to the source. So these were provided by default, but again, you don't have, you may have credentials, you may not. If you have them, put them in, enjoy. If you don't, let's not harass the net. I think those guys probably get enough from actual adversaries. Okay, so some of these have defaults like the port, so we don't have to put it in, but it never hurts to make things explicit. The password field, as you can see, is actually hidden. And then we are on the local host. This can be an IP address or a host name. Now, for running this on localhost, having the admin user operate as your regular decodes thing, not a huge deal. If you were having like a shared LRDS somewhere for a bunch of different components, you would want them all to have their own username and password, and that's what would go in here on those configurations. And that's all we need to put in here. Let's make sure I commit all every once in a while. Okay. All right. I'm just going to call it demo test. We're going to need to type this out on the command line in a little bit, so I want it easy to type. So this interface itself can be a little overwhelming. Properties are used fairly inoften. Even changing this is fairly inoften. The bulk is this portion here, name, data source, the date, time, and then the platform selection. So we are going to choose our local host. So pipe will print out to the screen, file will print out to a file. I'm going to go with pipe today, just to make our lives a little easier. Time zone, if you want your data output in a different time zone, you can do so. If you are dealing with data ingested into a system, I always recommend UTC. If you're just dealing with data to display to a reader, of course, use the appropriate time zone. The presentation group just needs to be selected. I didn't go over that in the slides, but real quick, that's just mapping, in this case, chef codes, and we identified a chef code. So it's mapping a chef codes to a unit, and then, how many digits should be rendered. Because I use the name stage, that would work with almost all of them. So you see stage 2, or you could do metric if you wanted to, stage. And because you define the units on the decode script, if the source units were metric or English, but you wanted the other, you would just choose a different presentation group in your routing, and it would convert for you. It would know how to do the conversion. So we are going to go with both here because the data files I have are actually from the 2nd of February. but we did ingest them within the last hour. So we're going to apply towards the time it was received and the time it was transmitted. We're going to select our platform. So you can also add a network list. So this is the network list. So you can have like a list of, I want these 4 stations in this routing to do something, and then the other 4. You can have all of them. It can go either way. All right. So now that that's saved, we'll do that for good measure. Go over here, and then the routing spec command on the command line is just RS. And then we just do that, and then I cross my fingers. So it did not work for some reason. So we're gonna, this is a trick that, this does not work. This trick does not work in Windows. This only works in Mac and Linux. I'm gonna have it output its log to the console and see why it is until time reached. Okay, so it didn't find it. So that's probably because of this. So I'm gonna actually tweak this now and just go back in time. And then see what it does. Okay, so that still didn't work. So I'm going to go back over here. Nope, I gotta open a new one. So, one thing to note, when you actually have this running in real time, you're usually getting data much more consistently, and some of these things aren't as much of a problem. Let's see if that works. There we go. Okay. So that was the point I had made earlier, the LRGS. And I don't think this is valid anymore. I want to change that. We'll time out and say, I haven't gotten any data, so I'm unusable, which is kind of silly because it's like, well, you got data previously, and maybe I want the old data. And since that should still work, one thing to point out, so if we up the debugging level, I go to standard out. Got to put the right command line switch in there. Okay, I gotta go dump the data in again. Now, again, when you actually have this working like in real time, this generally just isn't as much of a problem. I have yet to have this kind of issue consistently. Okay, so that trace button, it's just showing the same output here. People will run this on like cron jobs, on scheduled jobs. We also have a tool called the routing schedule that'll run in real time and do this. And when you're having problems, sometimes it can be beneficial to up the logging level. That's actually where one of these properties comes in handy. You could have the logging level only increased for this, but then everything else be a little quieter, which can be very handy. And then one thing to note, if we go back to the message browser, we're going to close it and open it back up again. If anybody was looking, said show down here, we have raw and decoded. And so we should be able to go, and so now it says we don't have anything configured for these, so it just says no platform. If we keep going, this should work. Yeah, and so it's, now that we actually have all of that association, when we go into the decode browser, if we're trying to look at current data in real time or something, we can, you can just see it, it'll just do that for you. And you can change, what format you want, like chef or chefit. Human readable when you're doing like manual diagnostics does tend to be the best. This is terrible for ingestion into a computer, but it's, good for us, the human beings that need to look at things. And then just for good measure, hit display all. It'll just pull every message that your DRGS has that you've configured it to look for. We could have made this cleaner if we went into edit. And then, so some of that same criteria from the running spec and selecting a platform or set of platforms. It would just limit what this display has. And then you can save to a file, of course, if you want. Okay. And then properties, this is just changing the defaults on certain things. All right. All right, somebody offered up a station, but I say to that person, go ahead and throw in the NOAA ID name and some other details, but now is a good stopping point for questions. Well, actually, we're about 10 minutes from the end of this thing, so maybe we don't actually have time for that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. Michael, you said that you use the default username and password for the LRGS account, which is LRGS admin. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it comes with, and you can change it fairly easily. Just go to this set password button right here, and it'll let you change it.
Okay. We have a system that we applied for an LRGS username and account. So we could just use that one that we have instead of this LRGS admin.
So this is for your local instance of the LRGS, so you configuring that instance. Where that account would come in is in the DDS receive. So if that account was for the CDA data, you would put that username here, check use password, and then you would go over to user administration, and then you would add that in here as well. Because this is the administrative account for this local LRGS. When you applied for an account that was to connect to, say, NOAA's LRGS, you don't have an administrative account on that LRGS. You have a user account. So on the other hand, if you try the LRGS admin password and it works, be a white hat hacker and please let them know. But it should not work connecting to the upstream system.
Okay.
So I guess that's one thing to note with the LRGS is it's kind of designed to be, when you're talking to different LRGS components, you can set it up as a network of LRGSs that can share data that different people can talk to. So I know previously there were questions about bandwidth. If more bandwidth was needed, but NOAA couldn't supply it to everyone, and people wanted to like get together and host their own somewhere, you could actually have that LRGS initially get the data and then serve out to everyone else if desired. So you can kind of do like a federation of LRGSs.
So when we follow your procedure right now and we install this system, what is it connecting to?
It should be connecting to nothing by default. And then you add connections. So we added a connection. I put that in air quotes because it wasn't really a connection. We said, here's a directory with data files, process it. You would then have to manually make sure those files got into the directory to be processed. And you saw me do that a few times.
Okay, and that directory would be the one provided to us through Internetcast. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you had an account for an LRGS from somebody else, you would just add that information here on the DDS receive tab.
I'm understanding now. So, like, since we have an account on the NOAA LRGS, we can add it here. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I get you now. Excellent. All right.
And then this would actually be pulled in real time without you having to manually copy anything.
All right. So, and then just repeat again, when we go to the DDS receive and add it there, we would have to add it on the, where again?
Yeah, so if you're talking to the NOAA system and it is the CDA system, so that line's already in there. So you did edit, and then it says DDS username. So that'd be your username. You're going to need your password, so you would check that box.
Right.
But then after that, to actually set the password, you have to go in this user administration, and then you add
Okay.
You would just add that same information here.
All right.
And then if you are setting up an LRGS, there's another default that I absolutely think needs to be set. So the DDS server, that's what the LRGS real-time status talks to, is this local DDS server. Check this box right here. It says SHA-256. And probably check that too. Especially if you're going to have it open on a network, even an internal network. At a certain point, we are going to make a breaking change of just removing the previous login method, because it's based on the SHA-1 hash, which is known to be crackable. There is currently no encryption on this port. That is something that I do want to add that actually shouldn't be too difficult. It will just involve adding a couple of additional options for the certificates and such, but it doesn't exist right now, which some IT organizations can find problematic. So be aware of that. All right. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Ian. I have a question. If people have questions arising from your slides, what channel would you like them to make contact with you, if at all?
Yes. No, we try to be very open. So there are several places. One of the best ones to start is just the GitHub page. So we have issues, we have discussions, and then if we scroll down here, we have a mailing list. So
Okay.
kind of see the getting help. And on either of those things, if it's just kind of a question, I would keep it to the discussions of the mailing list. If you're using it, it's like, this seems really unusable and wrong, I would open an issue. And if I don't get to you because I'm on vacation or something, somebody else will probably answer the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Ian, do you know if we have a list of NASDIS IDs so we can identify the platform somehow?
Yeah, this is Ian. I'm afraid I don't know that much about DCS, and I've always intended to get myself an account, an LRGS account, but I haven't done it yet. So the answer is I don't know where
Okay.
the list is. Someone else online, attending might know more about it.
There's supposed to be a text file available, but I've always felt it's a little questionable about how up to date it is, because I'm as guilty of this as anyone. When I was managing platforms, we didn't always update things on time.
Excuse me, can I make a question?
I see Jorge has a question.
Yes, thank you for your kind presentation. So we know that from 20 to 24 this month, we NOAA will have a outage because it's moving from this equipment. So how will impact this connection in this software?
All right. So if you were connected to the CDA data LRGS, you would just start seeing gaps. So normally you would see, whatever appropriate numbers for you. If you had 100 stations, you'd see somewhere around 100 in each hour. When they had an outage, it would just be zeros. Now, if the outage is like all of the satellite infrastructure, we've just lost the data. If the outage is just a network outage because they're doing updates, but the satellite stuff's working and they're getting it locally, what you would see when it comes back online is it would actually try to recover all of that data for you. And so that if you were getting data up until 13, 14, and then it came back to 17, 18, these are UTC hours, by the way, you would just see a larger number. You would see, like 400 in that example I provided. So it does It recovers from the outages that it can recover from.
This is Ian. I want to answer in a slightly different way. If you're getting your DCS data through the GeoNetcast Americas broadcast, and that outage you're talking about won't affect you. I mean, if all goes according to plan, the data flow of DCS data will not be affected. And there's redundancy in the system, so DCS data will still be delivered.
Thank you for the information.
I'm also received a question about the data distribution mechanisms where we can retrieve DCS data, and I shared the presentation from our last webinar where users may see the satellite broadcast options like the CPR, HRIT, NWING, NOAA Port, and GeoNetcast Americas, and the terrestrial internet options like DADS and LRDS. So you have all this information in this presentation, and I'm going to share the link here.
Actually, I believe I have another meeting I need to get to about a minute ago.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Hope to talk to you again.
Thanks, everyone, and good luck to anyone who tries to use the software. It did sound like there was some interest, so I will get the virtual machine image off to the NOAA guys with a couple of instructions for people. And then if you want to try it in there, you can. Otherwise, you can also try it on your local systems if you desire.
If any other questions come up during the question and answer session, I'll be sure to push them to you.
Yep. And you can give out my my email if that works for everyone.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
Mike.
Good luck. Stay safe.
Yep, good afternoon. This is Paul Seymour. There's a GOES DCS Technical Working Group meeting in April that if you're a DCS user, you might want to attend if you don't attend those already. Hay un meeting de los usuarios de GOES DCS en abril, y si eres usuario de DCS, a lo mejor quiere atenderlo. Y Diego puede decir más que esto.
Paul, do you have any link people can register for that meeting, that technical meeting? Or
I don't have a link. You can contact Letitia.
okay.
Letitia or Valerie. Letitia Reeves or Valerie at DSK.
Okay.
But which Valerie is that?
Sorry?
You said also Valerie?
Valerie, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, another contractor that works for DCS.
Entonces, solamente traduciendo esta parte, va a haber una reunión técnica sobre el sistema de recopilación de datos, el DCS, en abril. Y vamos a contactar a Leticia y Valerie, que son las que trabajan con esto, para más informaciones, como los enlaces para registrarse, entre otras informaciones. Vai haver, pessoal, uma reunião em abril reunião técnica sobre o sistema DCS, e nós vamos entrar em contato com esses contatos que o Paul passou para a gente mandar para vocês os links para registro, para que vocês possam participar também dessa reunião, ok?
Es el 25 de abril.
Ok. 25.
This is Ian. I put Letitia's and Valerie's emails in the chat.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Right now we have a little time left for questions and answers, but I first wanted to show you this slide here. This is our contacts page. You can jot down my email address, although I literally spelt my name wrong. It's JOHN or GNC Americas. I was told that Natalia is leaving us soon, so I'll get you a replacement for that. And of course, Diego. Oh, what did I do wrong? That's what I did wrong. All right, our upcoming dates. The tentative date for the next user webinar, last I heard, was August of 2023. Is that correct, Diego? Was it August or was it July?
July. Yeah.
It is July.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Between July and August, it's a good
Okay.
date. Mhm.
great. Let's open it up to questions. If I can't answer your question, I'm going to stop sharing screen here so I can see the chat better. Figure out how to do that.
Just translating this final slide, we are going to
Yeah.
have nosotros vamos a tener otro webinar probablemente entre julio y agosto, e os manteremos informados. A gente vai ter outro webinar entre julho e agosto, e a gente vai manter vocês informados assim que nós tivermos mais informações. Do you have any questions related to GeoNetcast Americas or the products? ¿Tendremos alguna otra pregunta sobre el sistema o el DCS o los productos en el sistema?
Diego, yo sí tengo otras preguntas.
Ok, Fausto.
Sí, acerca vi que mencionaste en un principio los productos de contaminación de PM10 y PM2.5. ¿Esos ya se están transmitiendo? Porque no los he visto en el sistema.
Faustus is asking about atmospheric pollution products that we have mentioned on earlier slides. And he's asking if these products are already available in the broadcast. And the answer is not yet. This was a request from the last satellite conference. And these requests will be analyzed if it is viable to include these products in the broadcast. So we should have some news soon. Entonces, estos productos todavía no están disponibles en la transmisión, pero muy pronto vamos a tener más informaciones sobre la posible, sobre cuándo estos productos estarán disponibles. ¿Ok?
Ok.
Muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you, Fausto. Any other questions? Any other concerns?
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Well, if not, you have our contact information. Feel free to email me. I don't speak and understand Spanish very well, but I can read quite well. Portuguese, not at all. French, pretty good. So feel free to email me. Don't be shy. I could always ask Diego for help. And we'll respond to things as soon as we possibly can. Again, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you for being patient with the new guy. And we, I think, are able to publish a transcript of this, or at least a list of attendees. I haven't figured out how to do it on my machine yet, but we will get back to you on that if that is available and when. Any last questions before we sign off?
Do not have any other questions, so I think that's all. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot, John, Ian, Paul. Muchas gracias a todos.
Have a good day, everybody, and have a good weekend.
Saludos a todos.
Saludos.